the more and more I learn about this profession, the more I realize I didn't understand. Whenever I applied, it's just this big, beautiful landscape of anything that you want to do. And so I really want to stress that the word veterinarian is much, much bigger than clinical medicine.
Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. This episode is a little extra special for me. Hopefully most of you know how passionate I am about podcasting. And my guest today is a fellow podcaster, co-host of My Veterinary Life, Dr. Marci Kirk. Now, I've been following Dr. Marci and My Veterinary Life for a while now. A lot of our passions are very similar. So in this episode, you'll hear about why the vet med profession is awesome, why there are so many opportunities within veterinary medicine, and the importance to pursue things that you enjoy outside of vet med. Dr. Marci Kirk has been with the AVMA for about 6 years, and mostly focused in early career. So she's worked a lot with students and early career veterinarians. So excited to bring you Dr. Marci Kirk.
It is really exciting to have you, Marci, on the podcast. I have been a big fan and a follower of My Veterinary Life for a long, long time. So it's really exciting to be able to have the tables turned just a little bit and let you be the guest. And I usually start these episodes out with how did you or when did you know you wanted to get into veterinary medicine? And I do know that you are an early identifier, but I am curious of kind of like your origin story on as a young kid, what kind of sparked your interest into the veterinary field?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Megan. That was very kind. I really appreciate you saying that. I'm very excited to be on this side of the seat. It doesn't happen too often. Honestly, this is something I've been pondering a lot lately because I do not remember a time where I didn't want to be a veterinarian. And we had pets growing up, but I don't remember them when I was very little, like going to the veterinarian regularly until we got a cat when I was in like first or second grade. So, from the time I was 4, so I have to think somebody said something to me and I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And then I just ran with it. This is so funny to me because if you go back through like my kindergarten classwork, I put banker for what I wanted to be when I grew up. It's because I didn't know how to spell veterinarian and I thought vet meant veteran. And so I put banker because that's what my mom was and I knew how to spell it. So there is like, I don't have all my receipts for all of this, but if you ask anyone, I don't remember a time that I didn't. And so anything to do with animals in any part of our curriculum or anything like that, I was all in all the time.
So it sounds like your parents were not in veterinary medicine either. So somehow it's just came out. But I do believe that there is something on the words that we say to kids, and because it really can leave an impression. So I love the people who do have work with the younger generation. It's never too young, I think, to really have these conversations, read books about animals and veterinary medicine, because you never know when something like that will leave such an impactful impression that will make a huge difference in the future. So that's really cool.
Yeah, that's what the only thing I can think of is I remember my aunt was watching me one time and she was reading me Go Dog Go, which is a Dr. Seuss book, but written by someone else, but it's in the Dr. Seuss family. And I guess my mom came to pick me up and she's like, you've got to see Marci with this book. And she's like, all we've done all day is read it. And so they went and bought me that book. And so now every time someone I know, I have a stack of them in my closet. So every time someone I know has a kid, I get them Go in case that's the thing that sparks their veterinary interest.
I love that. I was looking and you've kind of been in Illinois for most of your career as well. So it sounded like your idea going into vet school was around small animal medicine. Is that correct?
Yep. That's very tunnel vision. That's what I wanted to do, wanted to practice. Nothing else was of interest to me. I mean, every once in a while I get a spark for, a specialty, but then I just realized how tired I was and I didn't want to do more school. So, small animal general practice. Plus I love love getting to know clients and building that rapport. Not that you can't do that in a specialty as well, but that was something that really spoke to me.
Yeah. To prepare for this episode, I went back and I listened to the very first episode of My Veterinary Life. And usually in that first episode is when the host talks about the why of the podcast and can share a little bit more about themselves. And that's exactly what I found. So that was great. And one of the things that you said in that podcast episode was your feelings of being lonely in clinical practice. And I was hoping you'd be willing to elaborate a little bit more about that and how you felt.
Sure. Yeah. So I think part of me too, and I do think people are doing a better job of preparing everyone for this now, but my whole life was focused on going to veterinary school. Like that was the goal. I literally did not have a goal after graduation. I mean, I wanted a job, but there was nothing, and my whole life had been very goal oriented. So I felt a little lost. And then I go out into practice, and I had a great first practice. There were 3 other veterinarians who were always willing to help me whenever I needed anything, and had been out 5, 8 and much longer years, ahead of me. And I was only on call one day a week and every other weekend. But there are times when you're standing in surgery or you're on call, and it can feel really isolating because I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And up till that point, I've always had this cohort of people. I mean, I had a really small high school. So it was 82 students in my graduating class. Then I went to University of Illinois undergrad, and my class sizes were a lot bigger, but you get this core cohort of people that are yep, we're all wanting to go to vet school. We're going to do the things together. And you do that. Then you go to vet school, and it's, 100 students, and you're kind of all moving together. And then you get out, and it's kind of where's my people, and I was in a small town. So it wasn't even, a good chunk of my class went up to the Chicago area. So it was a little easier for them to maybe get together a little more regularly. So I just felt a little isolated. And then I also, not that we should compare ourselves to other people, but the only people I had to benchmark myself against had been out a long time. So then when I couldn't hit the vein, or I was struggling with a spay, it just felt oh my gosh, I'm terrible at this. I'm the only one who doesn't know how to do this. Nobody wants to work with me. Nobody wants to bring their pets to me. This was a huge mistake, and just kind of kept spiraling. So it felt very isolating. It's something that I talk about a lot with students. It's build your network inside and outside of veterinary medicine, because you just don't know where you're going to end up at any point in your career. So it took a little bit, but I definitely found my footing. And I think that first year, no matter what you're doing, is challenging, and you kind of learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah. So what more did you learn while you were in practice? Because I know that you left general practice, but what kind of was that journey there? Of course, that first year, it's hard. No matter where you are, it's going to be hard. You're going to have imposter syndrome. You're going to have lots of questions. You're going to doubt. But past that, first year or first couple of years, when did you decide maybe I want to do something a little bit differently?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I've wanted this for so long, and I was still, once I kind of got my footing underneath me and my confidence was building, I still was, I never felt relaxed. Even when I wasn't on call, I just really was having trouble letting work, keeping work at work and just letting things go a little bit. So I thought, my husband was kind of ready for a job change. So we were able to both find jobs back in Champaign, where University of Illinois is. And so for this job in clinical medicine, for me, there was no surgery and no on call. So I thought, well, this is the answer. This will be it. And after a little bit there, I still was struggling with what do I want to do? Because I knew at this point I probably wasn't heading towards practice ownership. That probably wasn't going to, adding more stress to someone who's already stressed probably wasn't the right path for me. So then what did I want to do in clinical medicine? Did I want to carve out something like behavior or really specialize in some other things? Or did I want to start looking at other things? So then I joined the inaugural Power of 10 class through our state veterinary medical association. So that's where they took 10 recent graduates. So I think for the first class, they might have been 10 years or less out because nobody knew really what it was. So now I think it's 5 years or less. But for a year, we kind of went through these trainings together, and it was on communication and kind of leadership and knowing yourself. And during that time, I saw an opportunity come up at AVMA for recent graduate initiatives. So kind of helping with that transition from student to veterinarian. And I thought, oh my gosh, like I really struggled with that. I have all these lessons and I have all this knowledge from other people, and I'm really passionate about it. I'll just give it a try. And so, made it through the interview process and then ended up getting the role. And it is really neat because when you start to get into less clinical work, there are goals, right? Like there are promotions, there are projects, there are deadlines and things like that. So that fits my personality a lot better. And I didn't think I'd go back to clinical medicine because I was like, well, that just wasn't the right fit for my personality. But after a little break and talking to some of my friends who were up in the area, I started doing some relief work on Saturdays. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love medicine. Like I just love it. That's like a part of my brain I missed using. I love seeing the patients. I love seeing the clients. So doesn't always work out based on my schedule, but I try to do at least 2 Saturdays a month of that. And it's no surgery. So that's great for me. And something else I learned in that process, which I thought was really important. So if you haven't picked up on this already, I'm very type A, very organized, planned, down to the minute of how my day is going to be structured. And in private practice, that's hard. Like I'd get my schedule for the day and be like, okay, all right, I got, I can do this. And then, one appointment's late or an emergency comes in and it just kind of gets a little bit blown up. The practice that I do relief work at is a walk-in clinic. And so I feel like some people would be like, Marci, that's not a good fit. That's not going to work for you. But it's awesome because there's no schedule to blow up. So it's just, they come in and I just keep seeing appointments, and they know if the doctor's hours end at 2:30 and there's an hour wait, the line gets cut off at 1:30 and people are prepared for the wait. They say like, this is what we're looking at right now. And it just works for me. So I was like, I don't have to worry about a schedule. And I also, have spent, I'm over a decade out now. So I don't feel like I have to look ahead and prepare for every case that's coming in. There's some great doctors there. So if something comes up, one of us is going to be able to figure it out. So that's been awesome to kind of figure out how to balance all the things I love about this profession in a way that works for me.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. And ironically, I've heard someone else mention that recently as well. You established the expectation in your mind that I'm going to be flexible and I'm going to, things are just going to happen. And I'm glad that you were able to find multiple parts of veterinary medicine that all kind of come together to fit different aspects of what you're interested in. And on that note, do you mind sharing a little bit more about your role with AVMA? And because you've been working with them for a while now, so you have a lot of very unique perspectives about all sorts of things about veterinary medicine. So do you mind sharing a little bit about what your role is and just kind of your experience in AVMA?
Sure. Yeah. So the role of the recent graduate initiatives, again, was kind of focused on developing resources for that transition from student to veterinarian. We have an incredible student initiatives team, and that team visits every accredited veterinary school once a year. And so they are supporting the student AVMA and giving presentations, kind of letting them know what organized veterinary medicine is, or if they have specific topics like on well-being or finances or career, they'll speak on those topics. And so then we kind of notice that they're so used to seeing the AVMA so often, and then kind of just initially got lumped into the regular membership. So we really focused on how could we kind of connect with these individuals a little bit more, like meeting them where they are. And so we've gone through many different iterations of different emails or resources that we've developed, and the podcast was one of them as well. It's not limited to early career, but that was the initial audience that we hoped to reach. But I do think it expands past that to pre-veterinary, or probably like people like me in high school, I probably would have listened to something like that because I was just so hungry for all that information. But through that work with recent graduates, I also got connected with our director of member well-being. And so we've worked on a lot of projects that kind of emphasize some tools and skills that we can develop to kind of help our well-being and bring more awareness to that. Because I really think that if I'd had a better understanding of what I needed to take care of myself in veterinary school and to manage my stress a little bit better, I would have already had those skills in place, and the transition may not have been quite as rocky. And I then maybe wouldn't have sort of burnt out as quickly as I did. I mean, of course we don't know, but I didn't have any skills. I was just buckle down, get through it. So it's been awesome to see that that's growing in veterinary spaces, that people are really emphasizing that you're a whole person. And veterinary medicine is just a piece of that. And it's an exciting piece, and it's a piece you should be very, very proud of. But it's just a small piece. So part of one of the big projects we were on, we started My Veterinary Life website. So it's AVMA has so many resources. I mean, we have an animal welfare division, we have an econ division, we have an accreditation. So there's so much. So you can get a little lost on the website sometimes. So we thought, let's carve out a separate space for early career veterinarians and do the things that AVMA does very well, which is career finance and well-being. And we'll just put some resources together there that's a little bit different and separate them so they're a little easier to find. So that was a big project that we worked on, and it's going through kind of a review and an update. I mean, 2020 changed things a little bit. And so I think it needs a little refresh. So we're working on that kind of stuff. So it's been really fun to be a part of that and see everything grow. I also provided support to the Early Career Development Committee, which is one of the entities that the AVMA has that helps us. It has recent graduates on it. It now has a student member on it to kind of talk about where are we heading? Where do we want to go? What kind of questions do we need to answer? What are people struggling with, and how can we support them? So I truly love being part of a national organization that has such a wide reach, but also somehow building all these intimate relationships with people. I feel like I get to know so many exciting people, and our profession is very small. And I think we all know that. But when you really start reaching out, you understand how, like just the other day, I was at AVMA Symposium and I was giving a presentation and was talking about my friend. And I said, oh, and she does this and this. And someone afterwards came up to me like, is this your friend? And I was like, yes. And she goes, oh, she's coming to speak at our place. So they just knew from the little bit that I talked about with that person that who it was and that they would be speaking at their college soon. So it's awesome to see all that. And I feel like I have a front row seat being part of the AVMA. In the next year or so, my role is going to be transitioning a little bit, and I'll be moving to more focus on well-being and diversity, equity, inclusion resources. But the early career is it has such a strong hold on my heart that I want to see everyone succeed, because the more and more I learn about this profession, the more I realize I didn't understand. Whenever I applied, it's just this big, beautiful landscape of anything that you want to do.
I also agree about the diversity of opportunities in this profession and the amazing people inside of it. And you also mentioned you just got back from the AVMA Symposium, and with your work with the early career veterinarians, what are some of the most common questions that you hear from that early career stage, and what are the pieces of advice you give them?
Yeah. So I did actually a whole presentation with Dr. Sam Scholes on what we wish we'd known when we were in the early years. And so I talk a lot about like building your network, figuring out the well-being that works for you. Those are really important. I think a lot of questions I get now is like, tell me about your role. Like, how did you get that role? How do you, work everything in and that you love about the profession and still feel like you're contributing to it? Because I will say, I mean, I was only on the job like 3 weeks with the AVMA, and I was at AVMA convention and I was telling somebody about it, and they're like, oh, you're not a veterinarian anymore. And so that was a little hurtful. And so I really want to stress that the word veterinarian is much, much bigger than clinical medicine. And that's not to minimize clinical medicine. That's what a lot of people think when they think veterinarian. I just think we're in day and age where you might be a clinical veterinarian and you might be a speaker and you might do something else. Like there's just so much that we can do with it. So we get a lot of questions about that. Certainly not right now, but prior to the pandemic, a lot of questions about educational debt and how to manage that and how to work through that. When the loans start up again, payments start again, I think that will come back around. But just a lot of like career management, like what's next? What do I do? Like, how do I make the most out of this career? I feel like is kind of an overarching theme for the questions.
Hi, we'll be back with the second half of the show after this quick break. But first, I wanted to take a moment and thank you for listening to the Vet Life Reimagined podcast. If you're enjoying the show, the best way to support us is to leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps us to reach more listeners, and we really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. And now back to the episode.
And I completely relate to the question on what most people might consider a more non-traditional route as a veterinary professional, whether it's veterinarian, veterinary technicians also have a huge diversity of opportunities in veterinary medicine. And I don't think I personally ever got asked about you're not a veterinarian anymore. And I think this came up in the first episode was having a challenge in explaining what I do. So it takes me a long time. And I actually really loved the phrase. I wrote it down, that I'm a veterinarian for veterinarians. I thought was a really cool phrase. But
well, let me put one caveat on that though. Cause when I said that to a family member, they're like, oh, so you only work on veterinarians' pets? And I was like, okay, I maybe need like 2 more words in there or something. So yes, I do think that most people will understand that, but yeah, that was really funny.
Yeah, very fair. Yeah. I think it gets harder and harder the more away they are from veterinary medicine, right? That's also a good point too, is I think all the more reasons to build the network in the community and listen to podcasts like My Veterinary Life, hopefully this one, to surround yourself with multiple definitions and views of what, working in this profession can look like. And that you are first and foremost a human being, and there's more than just a title or a role. There's what we do that has nothing to do with veterinary medicine are all very, very important in who we are and thriving in everything that we do. It's kind of all wrapped together. So kind of finding our identity in a very diverse type of work, I think we need to continue to support each other with that as well. And pandemic probably did a lot in just kind of showing that there are a lot of different options in all different fields and professions. We need everybody, all those different roles in this profession to continue to get it to grow and to allow everyone to thrive. You talked about getting kind of a front row seat with how amazing this profession is, being at AVMA. And with the podcast, you get to interview a lot of different people all over the profession. So is there something that comes to mind when I ask, like, what's the most creative career that you've been able to witness in the profession? What people might think out of the box?
That's a tough one. I personally, I'm most inspired by the people that are like, they see something and they want to change it and they do it. And so they kind of have this entrepreneur spirit, whether that's they take on speaking engagements and they talk about it, or we've had a couple of people who have invented products or software to like better work for their situation. And then other people have found it useful too. But I think one of my favorite, and this has really nothing to do with their role, but what I love is they were thinking outside the box and how to serve their team. And so looking at staff retention and looking at overall, like, again, recognizing that we're all people. So one of the early interviews we did was with a veterinarian who has a nanny on staff. And I think that's becoming a little bit more common, but built a house and retrofitted it how they wanted it, or maybe they didn't build the house, but retrofitted it how they wanted it for the nursery. And the nanny works the hours that the veterinarians work. So because they're mixed animals, so if it's like breeding season and they're out, the the nannies coming in early in the morning and staying when they get back. Full employees, so gets all the benefits, vacations and all of the other benefits that the people had. And I just thought we're not alone. I don't want people to think that veterinary medicine has all these problems that can't be solved. There is a career crisis across the entire nation. And the pandemic has sort of highlighted that we need to address some of this. But I just thought we are trained to think so creatively. I know this sounds very Pollyanna or maybe a little bit hyperbole, but I do not think there is a problem that presents itself to veterinarians that we could not solve if we put our minds to it. So I think it starts by asking your coworkers and colleagues what problems exist, and then how can we solve this? And the other thing she said in that interview was she'll take any idea that a staff member took the time to bring to her, and she's like, we'll give it 90 days. We'll give it 90 days and see. And then you have the whole team behind it. So while it's not, she's a general mixed practice owner. I just thought that was really inspiring and really amazing to see what we can do. And we've since had some practice managers on that are getting ready to bring in a nanny. They had a gym, put in place, just asking the people what they want. And again, I think it's recognizing that we're more than veterinarians or veterinary professionals.
What a cool idea. I think also if we can have the nanny for the human children and then the pet sitter for the four-legged children as well, that would be perfect. I've had that thought with my own dog. The job I have requires quite a bit of travel, and my dog she's not a small dog. She's about 90 pounds. So she's kind of hard to, just carry around. So having the pet sitter too would be fantastic. One of the other things I've heard you talk about very passionately around the AVMA, and again, you get to have a front row seat to some of these things, is the Veterinary Leadership Conference, the VLC. Is that probably one of the your favorite events that AVMA does? And if so, what are some of your favorite things with that event?
Yeah, but I should probably disclose I'm a little biased because right now I'm on the planning committee for it. So I think it's awesome. I love it because, it does take place in January in Chicago, which probably doesn't sound the most appealing to too many people, but I promise it is worth it. It's a little bit more intimate. So it's only several hundred people. It also is tied with the AVMA's House of Delegates winter meeting. So you get to see how decisions are made and understand a little bit more about organized veterinary medicine. You also get all these amazing speakers talking about leadership, communication. And these are the skills. And this is another thing I try to tell people is all through veterinary school, the science and the medicine is there. And I was actually telling students this. I'm like, I graduated 2011, so over a decade ago. My notes are pretty much obsolete. There's so much, not all of them, but I've been trained how to think. I've been trained how to look up the information I need, and I have the basics there. The science is there, and yes, go to continuing education on that. But what I really, really could have benefited from is a little bit more on how to communicate confidently, and so that people can understand, and making sure that people are understanding, and how to kind of navigate all of that. And that's what the Veterinary Leadership Conference does really well. And what's even better is there's no scientific CE to compete with, because I go to these conferences too. And I'm like, ooh, there's some new derm stuff out. That sounds really good. Oh, look at this behavior stuff. This is really cool. Whatever's going on with my dog, that's what I'm drawn to at the time. Previously, I was like, ooh, look at all the oncology things, And so it's hard. It's hard to when you have all that science stuff, because that's what we've been trained on so well, to take time to carve out some of the communication. So I love that it's not competing with anything. It's a little bit smaller. And because it is January in Chicago, I do feel like the networking events and some of those fun events get attended a little bit more, because you're not necessarily going out and exploring the city as much. I do encourage people to do that because we're in the heart of where all the good food and stuff is. But I just really think it's a fun event, and it's right after the holidays. So I love a lot of the winter holidays. And so I get very excited, and then they end and I'm like, oh, okay, now what, And so it's this thing I get to look forward to right at the beginning of the year. So I just love it. And I think it's also an opportunity to see maybe some new speakers kind of coming around. And the team, the convention and meeting planning team who does most of the work, they put a lot of thought into the events that they do and ways to give back to the community. So I just really think it's a great event.
No, I like all of those points. And I've had multiple people say that they really love that event. And so the fact that you're getting hundreds of people to come to to Chicago in January says a lot. But I've also heard that it's a great opportunity to also understand AVMA a little bit and getting to meet different people from, all aspects of organized veterinary medicine as well. And I also know, including myself, not a lot of people might understand some of these aspects of organized veterinary medicine, like government roles and things like that. So I'm curious from your perspective, what is something that you think that maybe people get wrong about AVMA or governmental roles when it comes to the veterinary profession, and maybe correcting some of those misunderstandings?
I mean, I've been here 6.5 years and I'm still learning about everything that AVMA does. It's amazing. I mean, we have a whole division that's located in Washington, D.C., or at least close to it. And they work very closely with legislative activity. I think the misconceptions, it seems like we're a huge organization, right? Because our reach is so wide. But I believe our staff is around like 140 or 160, somewhere in there. And so it is relatively small for what I think we can accomplish, which just, I think, speaks to how amazing the rest of the team is. But I think people believe, and of course, then the volunteer network's much bigger. So you think of House of Delegates, it's huge. We got our board of directors, then we got all our councils and committees and all of that. So it's not just the staff that's doing everything. And this is what I had before I came on board, is that, well, my voice doesn't matter. Like, I mean, I'm just one person, but it does matter. And so I think that's an opportunity at VLC to get to know your leaders and express your opinions and figure out how you can express those and make sure that your voice is heard, because they want to hear from you, that when they're casting votes or anything, they are representing you. When they're talking to like US Congress, and they want to make sure that we have the best interest of the entire profession. So I think it kind of does seem like there's this barrier, but there really isn't. We all have at least one thing in common, veterinary medicine. So we can start there. And then we can kind of talk about the issues that are on the floor. And I'm just always blown away because I'll go in, thinking one way, and then I just love to hear the robust discussion that happens on the floor on certain topics, and just thinking, wow, that all happened then in a reference committee where people in the room got to voice their opinions and they're bringing things from their constituents. And that's how policies end up being made. It is a little overwhelming to kind of start to understand it. But there's a place for everyone's voice to be heard. And so I think it's very, very important to make sure that if you have an opinion on something, that you share it.
I love that message. And I was always happy to hear how many student representatives are going, or just students. And in fact, I think in particular, they try to get students who are not SAVMA.
They
try to mix it up.
Yeah, not SAVMA. Yeah.
Yes, which is great, because no matter how old you are or how long you've been in veterinary medicine, all of the perspectives are so important. I like to think of us as one big team in veterinary medicine. So we do need to hear all the perspectives. Well, before we leave, one of the other things that I know that you have mentioned is the importance of pursuing things outside of veterinary medicine. We spend a lot of time in veterinary medicine, but what are your thoughts around that? And what are some of your passions outside of veterinary medicine?
I think this is so important, no matter what your role is, if you're a veterinarian or not, or whatever, you're a whole person. And so finding things that bring you joy outside of whatever profession you're in is critically important. So I have tons, and it rotates through like what I want to do. I love whenever I can combine almost all of them together, if I can, but I love running, and I find a lot of joy in that. It kind of speaks to the goals thing, because I can set goals for myself, and kind of compete against myself, which I really, really love. I love Disney. And so I love when I can go run a race at Disney. So that's really fun. And there's a whole contingency of veterinarians that are starting to do that. So that's kind of fun when your worlds collide. So then it's also cool because we have things we can talk about at veterinary conferences that is not veterinary related. I also love reading fantasy books. I just love getting lost in like other worlds and things like that. So I kind of will sometimes just revisit old books quite a bit and just kind of dive into them. But sometimes I'll listen to them when I'm running as well. So again, I can just kind of make all of them overlap as much as possible. But those are like, I would say 3 of my big passions. The other time suck that I have like right now, the dog that I have currently is pretty high maintenance. So we do a lot of training and a lot of work, and we will never be winning any awards or anything like that. But we do some agility classes just to kind of try to like strengthen our bond, like try to turn on a few more brain cells, for both of us, but mostly for him. So he challenges me in a lot of ways and, talk about having to be like a very growth mindset. That's definitely something that he has brought to the table for me, but definitely running and Disney and reading are kind of where I get lost outside of veterinary medicine.
Nice. Okay. So 2 follow-up questions. First of all, what is one of your go-to fantasy reads?
Oh my gosh. Anything by Sarah J. Maas. She is like, she started young adult and then has gone into other things, but the worlds that she builds are actually absolutely incredible. I'm just going to take this time to get on a soapbox and say, if you're going to read them, you got to read them in a specific order though. You need to do her Throne of Glass series first. Then you can do the Court series, and then you can start the Crescent City. Throne of Glass is finished, but the other ones aren't. And it's very important to read the Throne of Glass before you read the Crescent City ones. She also really focuses on strong female characters. And I love that. I mean, it is very fantasy. I mean, there's magic, there's fairies, there's all kinds of stuff. It's just this whole other world, but these female characters are like I find them very empowering. So I just love those. I mean, but they are a commitment. The Crescent City, I think the first book was 800 pages, or maybe it was 700. They're big and they just keep getting bigger. So that's another reason maybe to start with the Throne of Glass so that you see if you like her style of writing. But yeah, she's awesome.
Awesome. I have not heard of her, so I'll have to go look these up. I was a big Harry Potter fan, so I had kind of flashbacks of Harry Potter as the books were getting bigger. So
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I do think that influences a lot of it. I mean, these are definitely darker, a little bit more edgy compared to Harry Potter. But again, just even Harry Potter, I marvel at how people plant seeds early in the books and you think it's an insignificant detail. And then 3 books later, sometimes I'm in awe of how their brains work, because that's not how my brain works. My brain works for medicine and things like that. And this creativity and this arc that they can go on, I love it. So I can just reread them and pick up more and more each time.
Yeah, absolutely. And for your dog, what kind of dog is he?
So he's half Bernese Mountain Dog, half poodle. He's 2 years old, and we've made the round. So we've been to ophthalmologist, we've been to dermatologist, we do all kinds of training. I have learned a lot. He's actually the feature of one of the presentations that I go out and give now. And it's about how we have all these skills that we know about animal behaviors and how we don't take things personally when they, act out. And we can kind of rationalize it, and how we can take those skills and apply it to like when we're dealing with an angry person in the clinic. And so he's like the featured example because he's like very leash reactive and like it's very embarrassing in the city. But I mean, we're working on it, but it's just it's not. I mean, I know that people walking down the street don't know that I'm a veterinarian, but it's like, oh my gosh, it's embarrassing.
I think probably we have lots of people who will have the same thoughts of like, please know that I am a veterinarian with this dog. So that's funny. It sounds like he's teaching you a little patience as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. He's teaching me that I didn't have patience and I need to work on that for sure.
Yeah. That's hilarious. All right. Well, I have a final 4-question round for you, and these will be different than your final questions on your podcast. But I will encourage everyone to go check out My Veterinary Life. Definitely scroll back hundreds of episodes to go listen to that first episode, because that is when you and Anna Reddish at the time, you have a new co-host, but Anna Reddish did your own final 4 questions. But for your final questions today, the first one is, what is something people may get wrong about you?
Ooh, that's a good question. People could get wrong about me. I tend to be very cheerful and bubbly, but that's not to say I don't see that there are issues that I'm not brushing issues off. I just tend, especially at work, to try to be a little bit more cheerful and optimistic. I like to joke with my new boss. Like I'm always like, people are going to show up. It's going to be fine. Like I give all the pep talks and things. That doesn't mean I don't recognize and also want to address that there are things we need to talk about in tough situations that we need to work through.
That was very good. That was an excellent example. So the second question is, do you have a hidden skill or interest?
Well, no, I'm pretty much an open book. I will say that. I don't think I have any hidden skills. If I do, they are also hidden to me. And I have yet to discover them. But I will say, thanks to Bucky, and I know we just talked about this, I am very interested in animal behavior now. Like, I'm fascinated by how zoos do the cooperative care and things. And I think that we can borrow a lot from that, because I certainly grew up in a time where, like, we have a schedule, like we got to get things done and you just do the things that you need to do. And I'm approaching it so much differently now. And I think that's for the better of me, for the staff that I work with, and for all the pets too. So there's definitely an interest that I'm growing. I hope it will become a skill that, like, is just natural after a little bit.
Well, it sounds like if you can tackle this one, you might be able to handle a lot more. So
I
start
yeah, I agree, because it's like it's every day. It's not just a 20-minute appointment.
You'll get your 10,000 hours in real fast.
Yeah, I know. I should. That's a good point.
Oh, that's great. The third question is there something on your bucket list that you would like to do?
Yeah, there's all kinds of things on my bucket list. I would love to, this is very superficial, but I would love to go to every Disney park. So that I've been to the United States ones, but I want to go to Disneyland Paris. I want to go to Shanghai. I want to go to Tokyo, Disney Sea. I want to see all of them because they all have something different to offer. And I think you get to experience a little bit of the culture as well. And so I am very excited to hopefully do that. I'm really hoping that they're going to bring back the Disneyland Paris races sometime soon. They stopped with the pandemic. And so hopefully they'll come back soon, because you get to go through the countryside and parts of that park. And I just think that would, like, I could check so many things off my bucket list. And then someday I'll put this out there, because it's going to take me a while, but I would like to qualify for the Boston Marathon. So I've not had a great track record of actual marathons. So at some point when I get my confidence built back up and tackle the marathon again, I would like to try to qualify for the Boston Marathon.
I will say, on the Disney side, I can relate. I have been to Disneyland Paris. So I have been to the one in Paris, but I now live in Savannah, Georgia. So I'm a 4-hour drive to Disney World. And we went to Epcot. I know it's dangerous. So maybe you'll come visit me. But we went to Epcot just not too long ago, like maybe a month ago. And they had in Epcot, because it's the different worlds in the back, the World Showcase, they had models of some of the other Disneylands and like Tokyo that you mentioned. And so I love looking at those. So I also would love to go to the other ones as well. So if you can find an excuse to get us there, please let me know. I will.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And Frozen's like my favorite movie. And so I can't remember if it's Tokyo Disney or I forget which one, but one of them has a whole Arendelle. And so I definitely want to go see that. But yeah, I just can't wait to explore it. I think it's nice to do something that's just a little familiar, but also push you a little bit more. And then obviously if we're making those trips, we're going to see the rest of the, not the rest of the country, but other things too. So
exactly. Completely agree. All right. Well, your final question is, what is something you are most grateful for?
I'm going to say I'm very grateful for the podcast because it connected us and has given all kinds of opportunities to chat with amazing people and help me stay in love and fall back in love with the veterinary profession. So I'm just like really, really grateful for that opportunity.
I had a feeling you'd come back and save me from all those lonely